Welcome back to Achieving Optimal. I'm Tommy Newberry. Today with me in this special episode, I have Republican candidate for U.S. Congress, specifically the House of Representatives in the North Carolina District 11, Madison Cawthorn. Madison, great to have you with me today. This is going to be fun talking about your goals, your aspirations, how you got here, and what's next on your path.
Well, I'm going to call you Mr. Newberry pretty often. I know you're going to resent that.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. The problem is, I just have so much respect for you.
I appreciate that, and likewise.
I've read your literature for so long, and you have really a lot of the lessons that you've imparted on the people is something that I've tried to model my life after. So I have nothing but respect for you.
Well, that is awesome, and I'll get to the backstory because I've actually known you for a very long time. Now America knows you. But I've known you in the early days, or kind of early days. But you do have a great story, and I think you're the right man at the right time, not only for North Carolina, but for the country. So let's go back to your life early growing up, because I think you've done some tremendous things, and I believe that tremendous things later in life are often the result of, or they can be traced back to your upbringing and your values and how you were raised and that kind of thing. So start off early. Where did you grow up, and what were you taught growing up that shaped who you are today?
So where this house sits right now, we're actually doing this podcast, I grew up about 400 yards east of here.
Oh, wow. All right.
Indeed. So I've been in this area for the majority of my life. It's been an incredible time. I always say, and it's sometimes in jest, but it is very literal, I was raised on Proverbs and Push-Ups. You know, I've got an incredible family.
Two good things.
Two great things. I've got an incredible family. I grew up with the best older brother you could ever ask for. I mean, he could almost replace my dad. He was so he was such a...
How much older?
Only 4.5 years, but you would think he was 20 years older than me, because just based on the maturity and the wisdom he had at such a young age. Then I had an incredible father who was just one of the most disciplined and hardworking men I've ever known. And then I've got my mom. And I'll tell you, my mom, I'm a mama's boy, of course, but she is, without a doubt, I would say, the most influential person in my life. And then she has shaped a lot of who I am.
How did she do that?
Well, it goes back to that Proverbs and Push-Ups. You know,
Tell me what that means.
So to us, what that means is, one, you really focus on discipline. And so whether, if I'm being punished, that means you do 100 push-ups.
Okay, love it.
But it also means, hey, you wake up, you do 100 push-ups because you need to be disciplined to actually move forward. And two, it's Proverbs. It's the idea of having lessons and wisdom imparted upon you, not just from the Bible, not just from Proverbs, although I read Proverbs every single day of my life from about 6 years old till I was about 18. So I have 31 books in the book of Proverbs. So you read one chapter every morning.
And then start over. And
exactly.
Repeat.
And it ends with the story of a really pretty girl that you get to marry, which I'll get to marry soon. So I'm pretty excited about that. But that was what my entire upbringing was about. It was about, one, being disciplined and strong, and two, living life with wisdom.
Yeah. So even so with the push-ups and Proverbs, I love that very succinct package. One is discipline, of the body. But when you discipline the body, you really help out the mind also. And then the Proverbs are, spiritual discipline, which also bleeds into your emotions and your mental life and so forth. So as you went through, middle school and high school, what was your life like? What did you enjoy doing, and what did the Proverbs and Push-Ups produce for you during the teenage years?
I'll tell you, I really enjoyed, obviously hanging out with my friends. I was very popular in high school. I had a lot of really close friends, and not just acquaintances. I had true friends, people who were really there for me. So I got to hang out with them a lot. I really was into athletics. I was trying to go to the United States Naval Academy. I got nominated by Congressman Mark Meadows. And then I also had a full ride ROTC scholarship to any state school here. And so I had been chasing those things because I wanted to serve in the Marine Corps. And so that was what I'd been chasing. So even early on in life, when I was in middle school, is when I decided I wanted to go on that path. And so I needed to be a leader. I needed to be physically athletic, and I needed to be very, very smart. And so I worked out a lot. I tried to gain leadership principles. And I was homeschooled with my upbringing, so it was a classical education. So,
okay, great.
Reading all the great literature from all of history. And so that's how I was really brought up. So that
So hearing you talk about some of the principles you've been talking about in the last few months, that really started early in life.
It started very early in life because I made the decision that I was aspiring something very large. But I'll tell you, I really enjoyed pursuing those aspirations. So one, being physically athletic, I really enjoyed working out. Being mentally sharp, I really enjoyed my studies and reading. But I'll tell you, to learn leadership principles, I really got the most of that from probably one of the things I enjoyed the most growing up, and it was actually working. I absolutely.
What did you do for work?
So I at 14 years old, I started working at Chick-fil-A.
14,
yes.
all right.
And
I did not know that.
I always say the most influential person in my life, aside from my family, is a man named Joel Benson. And I know you know Joel. He's in your 1% club.
That makes sense.
It does indeed. And so I'll tell you, just growing up there, I remember one time he told me when he made me a team leader there, he told me I had to read one book every month that was just to make you better. And I found out that he didn't require that of everybody. I think he just required that of me, which was great because I thought it was unfair at first, but really it was a great way to sharpen and expand who I was. And one of the things, this is actually my first copy I got of Success Not an Accident.
Fantastic.
I didn't get this in my younger years. I got this later in life when I was about 20, but I'll tell you, growing up and working with somebody who wanted to grow you and sharpen you and expand your horizons was great. And Joel really had a whole person approach. He wanted you to be good at work. He wanted you to be disciplined and work hard. But then he also wanted you to go the extra mile for people. He wanted you to do everything you do with a purpose and with intentionality.
So you learned that by doing.
Exactly.
And watching his example and the principles that he was teaching. And then at 14, I mean, all the way through high school?
All the way through high school, until I was 18.
So it was kind of instilled in you.
Oh, it absolutely was,
mentality.
Yeah.
So what else got you fired up when you were in high school? What are the things you liked doing prior to graduation?
Oh, so loved hunting. It was really, really something I enjoyed a lot. And I really just, my best friend in the world was my older brother, so getting to hang out with him a lot, that was a great joy to me. I loved being in the outdoors, chopping wood, camping, whatever. I was a very active person. I really enjoyed being in the outdoors, but I'll tell you, probably my biggest favorite hobby as a passion is cooking.
Okay,
and
all right.
Yeah, specifically French cooking. So the reason I had to work out so hard is so I could put a lot of butter in my food.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I've seen some clips of you chopping up onions. And
yes,
stuff.
indeed, yeah.
Well, good. So you really like it.
I really do like cooking. So it's something I've always tried to broaden my horizons on.
And all right, so let's fast forward to you graduated, and this is the part where a lot of people know your story, but really most of the world doesn't know your story. So if you wouldn't mind picking up and telling the story of what happened with the accident. It was after high school, and pick it up right there.
So it was right before high school was about to end.
Right before.
Been nominated to
okay.
the United States Naval Academy. I was waiting my acceptance. I had my full ride to, I had chosen NC State as the school I was going to go for with my ROTC. And so I was trying to decide where I was going to go, and I was trying to decide what God wanted me to do for my life. And so I had this long period of fasting I did with my mother, and that was just, where you replace every single meal with time you spend with the Lord, just kind of seeking Him. And so my entire purpose of that was, God, what do you want me to do for my life? Send me to a battlefield. I want to win glory for your name. And, I envision that as a literal battlefield. But then, so I'm in a very celebratory mood. I feel like I've achieved every goal I had in high school. My parents are very happy with me. And so I'm on a road trip with one of my best friends celebrating. And just in the middle of the day, for whatever reason, I'm taking a nap in the passenger seat.
You're in Florida?
In Florida, yes. Yep, right outside of Daytona. And he thought it'd be better as a group activity. And he fell asleep behind the wheel. And then we ran headlong into a concrete barricade at about 70 miles an hour.
And so how are you put back together like this and so sharp and so future focused given all that? What happened next?
Intentionality. It was having a purpose for your life. I think we should always live with a mission statement, a narrowly defined goal. And so if you ever have a decision to make, you can compare A or B to your mission statement. And whatever takes you closer to that, you'll choose. And so going through the hospital, it's a little over probably a year of recovery. I had a lot of really great people around me, and I was very hopeful that I was going to walk again. Very hopeful, and I still am hopeful of that. But at this point, I know it'll take a miracle. Yeah.
Well, that's all right.
Yeah, and so moving forward, I worked for probably a year, working really hard at rehab, just trying to regain my ability to live life, to be independent again. And it was a long, hard road.
How long before? So this is down in Florida, so you're not even at home.
Nope.
You're not in the neighborhood. So you were in Florida for some time?
Yeah, I was in the ICU, the intensive care unit at Halifax Hospital for several weeks. I think over 6 weeks.
Okay.
And then after lots of highs and lows, lots of, he's probably going to die. Oh, he might get better. Oh, no, he's probably going to die. I can't imagine the emotional roller coaster my family was going through. Then I was transferred to Atlanta.
For Shepherd,
Into the Shepherd Center,
okay.
yep. And so there really had to relearn how to live life. I mean, learn to live life in a wheelchair. It's every single day is about, it's a series of about 20,000 minor inconveniences that always get in your way, and then some major inconveniences. And so it takes a lot of mental toughness and a little mental sharpness. And so I realized, though, but once I got put into the Shepherd Center, most of the people who have spinal cord injuries, they're young. They get spinal cord injuries because they're active.
Yeah.
And I started looking.
So that was what, 5 or 6 weeks after, or a couple of weeks? Or?
No, I believe this was about 6 to 8 weeks after my accident.
Okay, so you know what's got to happen once you get to Shepherd.
Yes. Well, so once I get to Shepherd, I'm there for about 2 or so weeks, and I start really understanding, wow, I need to relearn how to live life in a wheelchair. And as I'm looking around, I notice, like I said, there's a lot of these young, athletic, active people that are there. And I'm like, wow, every single person here is like me, and they've had their entire life ripped away from them. And I had been praying, and then when I was fasting, I said, God, send me to a battlefield. I realized that, it wasn't a literal battlefield I was being sent to, but I was in the epicenter of so much pain and so much, I don't even know if it's a word.
You were in a battlefield.
Lostness.
Right there, yeah.
And so I started looking around, I saw that all these people were going through such a hard time, so I said, I can be a light to these people. And so I just started being an encouragement, and that was having.
See, I love that because that probably helped you a ton.
It did.
Right? It took your thoughts off of yourself and any thought of woe is me, because you're surrounded with others. I mean, it's a great principle that probably wasn't something that just came up out of nowhere. To me, that's a result of everything before it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you said it yourself that everything that's happened up until the point, every day you wake up, everything that's happened to your life before that is preparing you for what's about to happen.
That's right. That's right.
And so, I think being in that place and having that mindset of, being a helper and being a servant to others, that really helped me get through my issues to get through the hospital, which took a very long time.
So there were ups and downs early on, but then there were ups and downs for that whole first year, right?
Oh,
where you're probably your mind, you got more optimistic, and then you probably got discouraged and up and down.
Right. No, so as I said, I had hope that I was going to walk again, and so I was like, oh, you know what? By the time I'm through my 19th year of living, I'll be good to go. But then I turned 20. And I realized that last birthday, I had said, you know what, my next birthday, I'll be standing up for you all to sing happy birthday. And it wasn't true. And so I kind of got to a very low place. I really did. I was saying, well, what's my purpose here? Do I have any value?
This was soon after you turned 20.
Very soon after, yes.
Yeah, because that occasion kind of was a little bit of a wake-up call.
It was a wake-up call. I said, wow, this could be where I'm at. This could be my life. And so I'll tell you, I'm a very decisive person. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to choose the way I'm going to live my life. And so I made a literal T-graph. And one was, the cons of living. And it was if that side won out, I was going to give up. And I was just not going to do it anymore. If the pros won out, my decision was going to be that I'm going to live my life, maximize as much as I can, because, I'll do what I can with where I'm at with what I have. And I won't say what was me.
And were you making the pros and cons? Were you doing that on your own?
I was doing that. It was about a 4.5-hour night of me just sitting there just laboring over this.
And so your conclusion ended up being what I think of as a turning point.
It was a crossroads for sure.
And what did you decide?
I decided I was going to live my life, and I was going to live it to the fullest. And I still, the one thing that really truly beat everything else out is that I still have the ability to make a difference. There's a reason I'm alive. There's a reason I'm on this earth. And I still have that ability to make a difference, and so that means I need to prepare myself to do it. And being where I'm at right now, being able to run for Congress for an open seat in my hometown, a lot of people call that luck. But I have a different definition of luck for most people. I tell people a lot, hey, the harder I work, the luckier I am. But
for sure.
My definition of luck is it's when great opportunity is met with extreme preparedness. And so to be able to run for Congress right now, it started a long time ago. And
and I kind of think of it very similarly in that success is not an accident.
Amen. Yes.
Meaning that what a lot of people call luck is the result. It's the visible result of efforts they never saw.
Right.
In your case, not only your upbringing, but then how you responded to adversity, and then that inner decision that you made. And then envisioning and being intentional with what you wanted to do with the rest of your life to make the most out of what happened. And then an opportunity comes up So there may have been a lot of people that wanted what you wanted, but you were ready. You were the right person in the right time. And I think there's a little part of us, kind of the lower side of our human nature, that likes to see people succeed and attribute their success to luck.
Yes.
Because it makes us, the lower side of us, it makes us feel better. Oh, I didn't reach that not because of me or my work ethic. I didn't reach that because I'm just unlucky, and Madison is lucky. So I don't know how you could be lucky and then lucky. I mean, either you're lucky or you're not lucky. And I think luck is predictable because it's just something that we can't totally explain why it happens. It's just, I'll kind of paraphrase the way you described it. It seems that people who are prepared and people who use their time well and people who are intentional, they seem to be a lot luckier, don't they?
They sure do.
They sure do.
Sure do.
So the backstory that I alluded to earlier, you of course know it, is we met, so probably 4 years ago, something like that.
4 or 5, yeah.
Yes. And you came down to Atlanta with Joel, and one of the things that you had with you was a goal map. And
a vision board.
A vision board, a poster that had images placed all across it of things that you wanted to do with the rest of your life. And we've got that right here, a copy of that. I remember it. It personally inspired me because there you are, you're still pretty close to this dramatic life event.
Yep.
And you are as positive or more positive than all of my clients who were trying to envision their future with 100% functionality. And there you are, and you've got this huge challenge at a young age, and then boom, that's not interrupting at all what you're aspiring to do. So let's talk about one or two things on here. What's kind of funny part of it is, it has at the very top, and this is funny in a very cool way, it says Gressman. And then behind the word Gressman is a picture of the Capitol. Tell us about what a Gressman is.
So on the way down to Atlanta, I actually lost 3 of the letters, the C-O-N. So Congressman, and at the bottom it says Cawthorn. It was just, I have a very service-minded mentality. My family's, I've come from a long line of Marines. But it was always a purpose to serve your country, and so I knew that I could no longer serve my country in the military like I wanted to. But I now had still had the ability to be able to serve my country in the government at some point, and so I had no idea when that was going to happen. But that was the pinnacle of my goal board.
Yeah, I loved it.
This is great to see. I haven't seen this in years.
Yeah, I have. Maybe I've looked at it more than you have because when I have seen what you've accomplished, and then I remembered that instantly. And there's the picture of the Capitol, and this was maybe envisioned then 4 or 5 years ago.
It was.
And then you just went to work, doing what needed to be done, preparing yourself, and then the opportunity opened up, and you were there and available and ready for it, and that's pretty powerful, isn't it?
Right. It really is, and it's just great to see this because I've got a picture of a rifle on here that I now.
And you just showed me the rifle.
I now get to own that rifle, which is great. I've got a picture of a dog that I wanted to own. And so I now have my great dog. I've got the picture of the Eiger Mountain. It was a mountain that I went to the very top of with my brother and father when I was young and could still walk. But I've recently gone back there with a very dedicated friend who actually helped me get to the top of that mountain again.
Yeah. And so that I just saw that picture as well. So this is one of the, it's a kind of amazing. I mean, it's almost miraculous, except this is a fruit of a intentional life.
It is.
It's not really magic. It's not luck. It's intention. So I know that you have applied many of the principles in Success is Not an Accident. That's a book all about living intentionally. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I think, early on, when did you you recall when you became familiar with that term even, being purposeful, intentional? How did that first come to you?
It first came from Chick-fil-A. I mean, you can't be around Joel Benson.
Well, that's fantastic.
You can't be around Joel Benson very much and not be told, hey, what's your plan? What's your intention? What are you going to do? I remember very early on he would ask me sometimes, just for a shift at Chick-fil-A, what is your vision for when the store's closed, you're leaving, what does it look like? And then I would explain it to him. He said, now work backwards from there. And so that's the same thing you advocate for in your book, Success is Not an Accident. And that's the same thing with this vision board. The highest pinnacle of my achievement there was to be able to serve my country in Congress.
Right.
And so there I started working my life backwards. And I had a much longer timeline in my mind for this vision board, but
as I did as well. But nonetheless, that's what sometimes happens is things don't happen on our timetable.
Right.
But it's a fair point to say that some things that we intend to reach in 5 years may take 10. It can work the other way as well. Right. And so I have found over the years to be rigid with what you're going after. Be really firm and non-negotiable with your outcome, but be very flexible and malleable with how do you get there. And then if you do that, it can sometimes surprise you in the ways that you get there. You may not end up arriving at your destination the way you thought you would, but you're still arriving at your destination.
So true, so true. And I think that's the biggest thing that I think should be imparted to the younger generation, in our country, that I don't think is being imparted to them, and all over the world. And it is just that purpose-driven life, to have a goal for your life, so that when you wake up in the morning, you're excited to be awake because you have another opportunity to achieve your goal.
And why do you think so few young people are even aware of that concept?
So, as you know, I got to recently speak at the Republican National Convention. A huge stage, probably about 40 million people watched it. It's incredible. So you have that stage, and on there's one line that I said, is that now I believe we live in an age of information without wisdom. And what I really think is going on, there is more information accessible at our fingertips today than has ever been accessible in all of history. The common man in the United States is more intelligent than almost any other common in all of time. And it's because they have this high level of information in their heads. But they don't have the wisdom that is imparted sometimes from the hard work that I think comes from...
Or being aware of timeless truths.
Exactly.
So they have a lot of data.
Yes.
They have a lot of information, but they don't necessarily understand how the world works, or how it was designed, or the principles that make life worthwhile. And so without those truths, it seems like there's a lot of people out there that are just making up their own little laws of life because they don't have the wisdom to discern up from down or east from west, sweet from sour. It gets biblical when you look around and you see what's happening today.
You're so right. It does get biblical. It really does. And that's something, when I started running for Congress back in December, my line was, I don't like the direction our country's going in. But now I see, I mean this for kind of the whole world as also, we kind of see that we're not just going the wrong direction. We've arrived to the wrong destination. I mean, you just see...
Clearly.
It's not to be politicized about it, but it's just, there is so much unrest in our country right now, whether it's racial tensions or whether it's political divide or whether it's the protests going on in our country. Right now, our country is at a precipice moment. And so it was interesting to start running for Congress when the economy is better than it's ever been in all of history, when everything seems like it couldn't get any better. And then to now be at a position where I used to pray to God and say, God, why did you not let me be born in the 1930s so I could fight in World War II?
Yeah.
And now I'm looking around and say, wow, God, you put me in a pretty wild time to be alive. And so now I've been put in a position based on actions I've taken in the past to where I can move the dial one way or the other. And it's an honor. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, well, it's the time where I think God is making the right people show up at the right time. And sometimes those people can surprise us,
right?
Which is one of God's trademarks. You just can't predict what's going to happen.
He's got a sense of humor.
That's right.
I'll tell you, I know we've got to take a break and say, but I'll tell you, I think that there's just a generation of people being born that are born for such a time as this. I mean, I look around at the peers of my generation, and I'm inspired. So these are great people. And now I realize, well, this is a terrible time for people to be alive, and you need great people in terrible times.
That's right. Well, I think that's one of the part of the value you can add to the world right now is being an influence and being a young person that has a positive influence on the rest of the world. But yeah, let's take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll pick back up with your mindset, and then we'll get into some of your principles that are guiding you on the congressional run.
All right, Tommy. Thank you, brother.
All right, so Madison, let's talk now about the primary. You went up against a large number of people in the field and you took them down. You got it down to, I think, a runoff.
Yes.
Take us through your strategy for winning and how you pull that off, because everything I can read about it, it appears it was labeled an upset.
It was labeled an upset, and I would say it is an upset. You know, a political outsider, someone who's never held political office, 24 years old when I won, coming in and running a race to be a congressman in this tumultuous times. So when the seat opened, there were 12 Republicans that signed up for the Republican primary.
Okay.
Yeah, incredible people. They all would have made good representatives, and I respect every single one of them. But so what we did was, you know, there were a significant amount of people who were offered their services. Say, oh, we'll come work with your campaign. This is the strategy we use. And I would call them Washington insiders. Their job is running elections. But you know what? Normally, a lot of people say, oh, an election, a candidacy is, a lot of people will define as the ultimate underfunded, unorganized small business.
Okay, all right.
It's like to run. And when somebody told me that when I was interviewing them, I spurned. This is not going to be underfunded, and we will not be unorganized.
When did you start, by the way?
It started December 19th.
Okay,
Yeah.
December 19th. Yeah. So 11 months ahead of the election.
Yes.
About.
Yep. And so normally you start in August.
Okay. So you were a little bit of a late start.
Yeah, but that's because of when Congressman Meadows left office. And so I did not want to be an unorganized and what I would call an orthodox campaign, because I feel like, you know, we need something different. And if I want to be a different representative, I probably want to run a different campaign.
Love it.
And so instead of hiring, you know, these normal people, I hired someone who knows the ins and outs of it, a very experienced person. He's a consultant on my campaign, incredible, good family friend. And I've known him for about 3 years, been a spiritual mentor to me, but he also works really well in politics. And so I hired him. He's great, and because I wanted the wisdom. But then I said, let's also bring, I'm not going to hire a normal team. So I called my best friends from all over the country. And so I called one of my friends in Texas. He owns a steel company and a fireworks company. I said, hey, Blake, man, I know that you and I said that you were going to run your business over there. I'd run my business over there. One day we'd merge our empires and it'd be incredible. I was like, but something's come up and we need to save our country. And so he said, well, I'm in the middle of running a business. He's about to get engaged.
Country can wait.
And then I was like, yes, but you won't have a business if socialism happens. And he said, that's a good point. And so he has a business partner, toss everything onto his business partner, who I really, really want to say thank you, Elijah. And then he came to North Carolina, and we made a plan.
That is awesome.
And so our plan, we started at a 30,000-foot view, looked down into western North Carolina, and we said, this is the number of votes that we are going to need to win this election. And then, most people, they don't even determine their vote goals. They just go out and they run around. They say, we're going to do as many events as possible. We're going to get as many votes from everywhere we can as possible. I said, no, I kind of had a
So you figured out. I mean, you were intentional from the get-go.
Yeah, I wanted to have a Moneyball approach about it. And so what we did was we broke it down to, well, okay, if we need this many votes, let's break it up down by population in these areas of likely voters, and then let's add those percentages. And so, you know, in Henderson County, you know, we needed 16,000 votes. And then counties are broken up into precincts where you go vote. So where you go vote is a precinct. And so then we broke that all the way down to the granular level of how many votes do I need in every single precinct. And so then when I would go out...
You hadn't even taken action yet, right?
No.
I mean, this was the pregame.
This was the pregame. So this wall that's right here, there's no pictures on it. Cleopatra wasn't here. She went over to the other side with her husband, Caesar. And this wall was covered with maps of every single county in western North Carolina, so 17 of the westernmost counties. And then they were colored in a heat mapped of most important, valuable, like the most Republicans are in this precinct right here in Rutherford County. So let's go pound that precinct until we get the vote goals we need for out of there. And we did that this entire wall. And we sat here, we had our entire team, we broke down the lesson, what was going to happen, how it was going to work. And instead of hiring people who knew how politics worked, instead of hiring people who I knew were going to say, oh, well, this is what's always been done, that's how it's going to work. I didn't want that. I wanted people who were going to come and they were going to commit their entire life to this. They were going to eat, breathe, and sleep winning an election. And that's
what you did. And that sounds almost like a military campaign.
Oh, it was.
Thinking it through and then having it mapped out and knowing what you have to do here in order to achieve this goal and this. So who else is on the team? I mean, how else did you formulate?
Oh, we've got a pretty large team. You know, we have our video editors who, you know, they will feed them an idea, say, hey, I kind of want to get this message across, and they come and they use their artistic minds. They make these amazing videos that just really capture what we're trying to say. And so they do a great job with that. And then, we've got people who help us with messaging. So, hey, I want to talk about, this. I think that we need to have broadband access to everywhere in the house, every house in the country. And say, oh, that's a lot like the 1930s Electrification Act. I'm saying, oh, okay, walk me through that. And so I've got walking encyclopedias of all policy in the country, and they'll walk me through it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I've got a large team. They're great. But my team on the ground works 18 hours a day, and they do not stop.
And what do they do? I mean, how did you get from knowing what had to be done to actually doing it? Because that you're intentional. You knew the end result. You knew the math. A lot of people don't do the math. You did the math, but then how did you execute?
So that's where it gets fun. So I put Blake in charge of what we called the ground forces, and that was our volunteers. So my job was to feed troops into his army. And so I would go out and give a speech, give a rousing speech. Everyone would like it. They would talk about my policy, my positions. And then when I was done, I would walk around, go shake hands, meet everybody. And if they said, hey, I would love to help with your campaign, say, that's great. Here's Blake Harp's card. Let me get your phone number. We'd write all that information down. We fed that in until we had a large contingent of trained and active volunteers so then when we broke this down by precinct, you tell me where you live. And so if someone comes up to you and says, like for this election right now, I'm going to need 295,301 votes.
I love that specificity.
You're an exceptional man, Tommy. I walked up to you and said, hey, give me 295,000 votes in the next 64 days. You'd probably say, I mean, that's great. I don't think I can do that. And I would.
Where would I get them?
Exactly. Where would you get them?
You know where to get them.
Exactly. So what I can do is I'm not going to walk up and give you this ridiculous number. I'm going to say, hey, out of your precinct, out of your neighborhood, I need 32 votes. You can say, I know 32 people who live around me. Say, great, here's your information. This is all the answers to any questions they'll ask. And then we made a sophisticated app that they can use so they can know which houses to go knock on. And then they were responsible for giving me 31 votes out of that area.
And so you then kind of knew where you were.
Exactly.
You knew the score.
We always knew the score. And so it was great because going through our primary, polls are very expensive to run. So very few people ran polls because they were just trying to pour as much money as they could into the campaign. But we had an instant poll every day. We knew exactly how many votes we had identified. And so then when election times came around, we had a knock and drag strategy. So where we sent our army out, we sent our volunteers, our executors out, and I say, hey, I know that this person at 657 North Rugby Road in Hendersonville, they said they're a Madison Cawthorn voter. And then I look at the voting registration files for that day, I say, this person has not voted yet. You will go knock on their door, say, hey, you haven't voted for Madison yet, do you want to save your country, you need to go do it. Oh, that's great, yeah, but I got my kids here, I can't go alone. Okay, cool, I'll watch them, you go. And so, I mean, it was get them to the polls, whatever you had to do.
I mean, yeah. So you're anticipating what might go wrong,
exactly.
The resistance, the objections,
right.
And you've already kind of got a plan for that. What's the team doing today? Are they out there today working it right now?
So we have volunteers that are out there working it right now, but we have 2 team training sessions because obviously with this election is much larger than a primary because you need more votes because it's major parties. And so what we have done is we're having more training for our new volunteers. And we're creating these county captains, people who are in charge of each county. So we have a team out doing that. We have another team who's utilizing our opposition research, verifying all the things that we need to know about our opponents. We have a debate coming up on this weekend. So okay. I've got my debate prep team. We're all working very, very hard. And then we've got my fundraising team, which they're about to drive me as soon as we're done here 3 hours away to go to a fundraiser because we have a very large district. It's about 3 hours from one end to the other.
All right. So it's pretty much going 18 hours a day.
Oh, yeah.
And it'll be that way right up to the election.
Yep, for the next 64 days.
You're going to have a pretty good idea of how you're doing real time
yes.
because of the technology and the ground game that you have.
And it's all about being intentional. It's all about setting up that infrastructure so you can have the tools you need to succeed.
Well, that is fantastic. So let's kind of back up from that and go, what is the message of your campaign? So that's your tactical, your strategic and tactical side, but what is the philosophical message?
Well, the reason why I'm doing this, and I'll tell you.
Yes, yeah.
I think that the two-party system's flawed and it's broken. Our founding fathers warned us against it. But when you look at the Democrats, I feel like they have a lot of their party has been hijacked by kind of the far fringe left wing of them. That's kind of pulling them in this radical direction of changing our country in pretty drastic ways. The majority of Democrats, I believe, are pretty much JFK Democrats, people I can relate with pretty well, but they're being pulled away because of all of these radicals in their party who are very strategic at what they do. And then on the Republican side, you have a lot of people who are so married to their ideology that they're unwilling to compromise anywhere, and so they've alienated the masses of people. And then also on the Republican side, you have so many career politicians who are absolute cowards, who do not stand for anything, and they just float with the wind. And that's a problem I see in our politics. And so I think we've got to get rid of that. We've got cowards on the Republican side, then on the Democratic side, Nancy Pelosi's been in office for longer than I've been alive.
Yeah, very close to as long as I've been alive.
And
Harry Reid, previously, there's some that have been there so long, and one crazy thing is, which I still haven't been able to answer, is how did some of these people come in and they've been doing it for 40 or 50 years, and now they're very wealthy? I mean, that's a whole nother issue, but how does that actually happen when you get paid fairly well? But how do you become
$174,000 a year
super wealthy doing that when you're there to serve the people? I think that's a big problem.
So this is my biggest thing. We have got to get money out of politics. And so, I mean, first of all, you can spend as much money as you want on a campaign, basically, and it gives you undue influence if you're an extraordinarily wealthy person. And then also, we've got to get term limits on Congress. And so my plan for that is, one, I think you should only be able to fundraise from within your district, if you're a governor, you should only be able to fundraise from within your state. If you're running for president, you can fundraise in the entire country. But that way, you're only accountable and you only answer to the people who put you there.
Who are closest to you.
Exactly, the people you are supposed to represent. I think that would get a lot of corruption out of Washington, because right now, because congressional members can get involved in IPOs, which is initial public offerings, on the stock market, that is where they almost utilize what is very nearly insider trading. And that's where you see these politicians making so much money. So we've got to get the ability for these people to go to Washington just to enrich themselves or empower themselves. It needs to be a duty, not a career.
Well, that's how it used to be.
Right.
It used to be almost that, I'll go serve now.
Right.
And then I come back after a couple of years and I go, okay, I'm done. Madison, you take it over right here.
Right.
And it was something that you did that was a sacrifice. And I can't stand constantly hearing these people that have been doing it for 40 years talking about sacrifice.
Absolutely.
Because that's not true sacrifice. But how do you pull that together into a central message? Like, what is it that you want people who just maybe experience you or exposed to you for a minute or so, what do you want them to remember about your message in the campaign?
Is that my entire purpose for going to Washington, D.C. is to put the pen of destiny back in your hand.
I love that phrase. What does that mean? What does that mean?
What that really means is that, in our country right now, I think we have basically 4 branches of government, really, because we have all these 3-letter agencies, whether it's the EPA, the IRS. I mean, you can
all these regulators.
Yeah, you throw any 3 letters of the alphabet together, and I guarantee you it's probably some regulatory branch of government you've never heard of. And so I think we really need to scale back the influence that the federal government has and give it back to the local municipalities, the local governments, and the people. Because right now, I mean, the Democrats care about, or the far left liberals, they really care about gender reassignment surgery for 12-year-olds. Whereas a lot of the people in the Republican Party, all they care about is incremental GDP growth at the end of every single year. And sure, you guys can talk about these issues if you want, but that does not affect what happens around the dinner table of my older brother who has 4 little daughters under the age of 6. He cares that they are going to grow up in a great country, that he doesn't get swamped by taxes so he can actually afford to take his kids on vacation if he wants. He cares that they have a great school system they can go to. He cares that they are going to go to bed and he's not afraid of someone breaking in and trying to kidnap one of his kids. These are
common basic issues. It's
exactly.
It's almost like getting back to the basics.
Yeah, it's all
getting
about
back to the fundamentals, because we've drifted away, and I talk a lot about how people get off track in life, because there's a kind of a parallel with the government or the country and individuals. Individuals rarely, fall off track. Some people do, but most people, they drift, just a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. So that's kind of what the country has done. It's drifted to where a lot of this dysfunction that you've just described has become accepted as the norm. And people don't even realize that, no, this wasn't what was envisioned, but now it is the norm. So how does all of this translate into what you call patriotism or being a patriot. How do you define being a patriot?
Well, I'll tell you, I think it's we want patriots, not politicians, but like you're asking, what is a patriot? And, you know, when I got to speak at the RNC, there was a line I used that in this country, we kneel to our God and we stand for our flag.
Yeah, it's
one of
the best lines of the whole convention.
Well, and I think that's really the ethos of what an American is, or especially an American patriot, because what that means is we are, I subscribe to Judeo-Christian beliefs. I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, but almost every religion shares the same thing, that they're loving, tolerant, and accepting of people. And, you know, just like Joel taught me at Chick-fil-A, you treat everyone with honor, dignity, and respect. And I think that's a critical component of what it is to be an American. But so that's where we kneel. But we also stand for our flag. And when we stand for our flag, that means that we're patriotic. It means that we're unwilling, or that we will not back down. It means that we will not apologize for our beliefs, and it means that we will work as hard as we can to accomplish our goals and to do it with passion and with vigor. And I think that those two things married as one and brought together as a single person, I think that's what makes us a unique people.
Well, I think that was one of those powerful moments of your talk, or maybe even the whole week, was when your two friends came out and you stood up at the end, because there was so much meaning. You could have said it and it would have been powerful, but having you struggle to stand kind of made that stick, and is crazy kind of how controversial that has become. You know, things that we used to take for granted,
right,
or things that you would have been saluted for, and still are in many ways. But, you know, a decade ago, no person would have had harsh comments for doing something that is clearly a reflection of virtue, you know, and love of country and love of what the country is and what it can be. And I thought that was powerful. But probably the best line of the whole thing was when you talked about be a radical for freedom. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know,
I love that.
Let me give you some context to that first, because when I start saying, you know, be a radical for freedom, be a radical for our country, be a radical for our republic, I obviously, as soon as I start saying that line, my two friends come about. One has the walk and they give it to me. And the reason I brought two friends out, because, you know, it's very symbolic of the three branches of government, the Holy Trinity. It just lots of things come in three. But also, I wanted to show that these two people come out, and in this country, we help each other up. We lift each other when we work together to heights that otherwise would never have been thought that we can achieve. And as I'm struggling to stand, when I say be a radical for freedom, be a radical for our republic and for our country, in our country right now, it is honestly radical to have the same beliefs that our founding fathers had 244 years ago. And I genuinely believe that I am a radical because I love freedom so much that I am willing to. I just got engaged. I had to push my wedding off for this to the spring of next year, so I can run for Congress right now. I would much rather be on my honeymoon right now, sitting on a beach somewhere with my wife, having a great time, just relaxing. But I think that our country is at a point to where I'm actually a radical for wanting to stand up for our country, to wanting to stand up for our virtues.
and to inconvenience yourself, and to put yourself at risk, and to put other objectives on hold. I mean, that really gets back to the true meaning of sacrifice.
Right.
You know, going and doing something not because it's maybe the favorite thing that you want to do, but because you feel called to do it. I mean, do you feel called to do this?
I do feel called. I think this is a calling, not a career. And I'll tell you, the reason I use the word radical is I wanted to redefine it in our culture to where, because I mean, you know, it is a sacrifice. And if you're willing to sacrifice yourself for something, that means that you have a radical belief in it. And I want us to have that. I want people who feel patriotic, who feel like they want to save our country. And I'm not talking about Republicans or Democrats, but people who just love our country as Americans. I want them to have the level of belief and commitment that a radical does, to where they say, you can kill me, you can try and stop me, but I'll promise you, you will not kill this idea, and we will move it forward. And that's what I meant by be a radical.
In other words, you're going to do what's right. You're going to stand up for the country. You're going to defend freedom no matter the cost.
Exactly.
And I think some people are willing to defend it up until a certain point.
Right.
And then if it becomes unpopular, politically incorrect, inconvenient, then they cower, they retreat, they do something different. And that's what makes what you're doing so special. So let's take another quick break and then come back and talk about some of the principles that undergird your philosophy of government.
Yep. All right, everyone, and now we're back with the Tommy Newberry Show.
And we're back with Madison Cawthorn, your next congressman. All right, let's talk about some of your principles that you want to bring in to the federal government. Things that you think should shape the future and that maybe your generation doesn't quite understand like previous generations. Well, should we start with Madison? Talk about Madison?
Let's transition to him in a second.
Okay.
Let me explain to you first my political ideology.
Love it. Let's do it.
And I listen to obviously Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, who's a good friend of mine, Dan Crenshaw. I think he's a little bit more centrist than I am, but he's great at messaging and explaining his reason for beliefs. And I pull from all of those guys. I pull from a lot of the great thinkers of your generation, and obviously from all the great texts of literature from all of history. And I think if you think about my political ideology, where it really stems from, my ethics and my morals and what I think is right and wrong, you look to ancient Jerusalem. You got ancient Judeo-Christian values of right and wrong. That's where I really base that off of. And then you think of every man and woman having value, no matter who they are, no matter rich, poor, where they are. Everybody has the same amount of vote and the same amount of voice, and that comes from ancient Athens. The total democracy. Everyone has a voice, and so that's where I kind of get my love and respect for everybody. That same principle that Joel taught me, treat everyone with honor, dignity, and respect. Yeah,
it's just traditional values that have been passed down for generations and only really recently have been interrupted.
Right. Well, I think we've got a lot of the same, I think those two are probably still around a lot. A lot of people still have the same ideas of right and wrong. A lot of people still think that every voice matters. But what I think we've lost a lot of our ideology is where it stems from ancient Rome and the Roman Republic.
How so?
Well, I think a lot of people are calling for just a total democracy, which is basically mob rule. And a lot of people have forgotten the importance of rule of law, the importance of order, the importance of tradition. I'm an innovator. I want to change things, but I also cling to a lot of traditional values and a lot of traditional ideas because they've worked in the past. I can prove them with history.
They're time-tested.
Time-tested. And so you boil all three of those ancient ideologies together, and I think what that boils down to is personal responsibility. It's all about the individual taking responsibility for his own. And if everyone has that version of personal responsibility within themselves, which I think we've lost a lot, what happens is you can have a limited government, because the only way you can have a limited government is if people are able to self-govern and to make the right decisions on their own. And so I think that having personal responsibility, and this is what I think you advocate for in almost all of your books, and that is taking responsibility and ownership of all of your time.
Not partial, but full.
It's complete. Like Jocko Willink's, Jocko Willink's book, which is incredible. It's just the buck stops with you, and you have those positions where you talk about financially. It's up to you to make the right decisions. With your family, it's up to you to be intentional and make those relationships work. With your work,
everything,
relationships, spiritual, all of that.
Extreme ownership.
Extreme ownership, absolutely. Yeah. And so that's really where my political ideology comes from. But
and if you take that as the base, really, it spills into everything else.
Everything else.
The limited. To me, aren't there kind of two views on how you see the government or the government's role that can kind of define. I've got a problem. I'm struggling. Do I look to the government
or myself?
Or do I look to myself? Do I look to my family? Do I look to my community, my church, and so on? And then also, how accountable is the government, which is a related dynamic. If the government is accountable locally, you can turn it over and change it if it's unacceptable.
Exactly.
The further away it is, right, the harder it is to hold the folks accountable.
Yeah, which is why I dislike the federal government so much. I want it to be local control. I want us all to have local.
All right, so let's talk about James Madison. I know that you have an affinity for him more than just his name.
I obviously like his name a lot. Yeah, but I'll tell you, I really like James Madison because, I messed up in my RNC speech. He actually did not sign the Declaration of Independence. I meant to say he was 25 when it was signed.
I caught that.
Yeah, because he was actually leading a militia getting ready to actually fight for independence at that time.
He's got a good excuse.
Yeah, so he was doing a good job, but he was 25 at the time, and I really resonate with him because he stepped up. At 25 years old, he said, I'm going to take ownership of this country, and I want to pass off a better world to my children. And I love the amount of personal responsibility he took for that situation. And so I've actually started something called the Madison PAC, And my entire purpose of it, PAC stands for Political Action Committee, so you can go out and you can spend money on political reasons. And so my entire purpose for that is in 2022, I want to go out and search out people who embody James Madison, people who embody their, because he authored a lot of the Federalist Papers, so he pretty much wrote almost the majority of our Constitution. And so people who really embody...
And did that all at a very young age.
Yes. People who embody that willingness to step up regardless. They don't want to wait in line. They're just like, we need to fix our country now. The people who say, you know what, and I've got...
See, I love how you're already looking ahead. You said 2022.
Right, and so but I'm going to get this great fresh crop of patriots in Washington in 2022, because now it's too late to get a bunch of new congressmen now. But we do have a lot of good freshmen coming in now. But once we have this great crop of freshmen, like in 2022, I feel like we can really make a change then. And
so what do you think James Madison would think about this push towards socialism?
Oh, I think he'd resent it. I think if you read in the Federalist Papers, specifically Federalist Paper number 52, where he's talking about the purpose of Congress, which is to be a kind of a cross-section of the United States of America, where you get to just, resembles the people so much that it sees. And so what's going on with that is I genuinely believe that socialism does not embody representing everyone. It just embodies representing the majority. And I think...
Yeah, well, but it's pushed off as such.
It is. It's pushed off as being for the everyman.
Well, why do you think it's bubbling up again? It's almost like a sickness that goes away historically in this country, and then it comes back up again, and it's like it goes into remission. And then it comes out again.
Exactly.
And it seems to come out again when the country hasn't taken good care of its health. It's governmental health, it's political health. It makes it vulnerable. But what do you think is causing so many people in your generation to be open to it, at least according to the polls?
In my generation, 62% of people think socialism is better.
So what's up with that?
I'll tell you, this is what I think the problem is. And this is when I went through my accident, obviously, it taught me some clear and obvious lessons. One, the lesson of perseverance, the lesson of grit, of stick-to-itiveness, of getting through the hard things. But it taught me one lesson that I did not expect to learn.
What's
that? And that was empathy. I used to have an imposing presence, and everyone used to notice me, and girls would check me out, and I was tall, I was handsome, all the things. Now I'm severely burned all over my body. I've got scars everywhere. I'm basically 4'5" right now. And it's a drastically different world. And so I see what it's like to walk in a different person's shoes. And so now, whereas I normally would have probably looked over somebody in a wheelchair, or somebody who's dealing with difficulties, and said, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I now have a lot more empathy. I say, you know what? Yeah, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but let me help you. Let me be kind to you. Let me be considerate. And I think the problem is that a lot of conservative ideology has been messaged as, hey, this is the right idea, but it also comes across as lacking empathy. And so I think a lot of Democrats have very idealistic goals and things that are good for everybody, but where the Democrats are missing is the actual, how do you get there? How do you get to a society that's good, that is that good?
Right.
And that's where conservatives come in. We have the ideas to get you there, but our ideology seems cold and rigid. And so I think we need to have a marriage.
So the lack of empathy kind of opens the door. Maybe when people are under stress or when they're scared, they're open the door to looking at a new way of doing things. And I think you're right, but I also think the fact that many people that are, 35 and under maybe even 40 and under, did not learn the principles of the country. They did not learn the freedom principles. They did not learn the first principles. Those were taken for granted. Everybody learned them when I was growing up.
Absolutely.
That was, every teacher taught them.
Right.
Now it's rare. Only in certain very narrow school markets do kids learn that. So then I say, if you add those two dynamics together, so the lack of empathy, just talking about the principles without the empathy, and then the people who are vulnerable and scared, and they don't know that going towards socialism is a violation of the freedom principles.
Yes.
So it makes them susceptible, right?
It does. It really does. And I think that speaks to the partisan divide, to where, oh, well, if you want to care about people, then you have to be a Democrat. If you want to care about profits, you have to be a conservative, whereas that's not true. We need to stop thinking about being Republicans or Democrats. We need to start thinking about being Americans. to where we all move forward and we do so with conservative ideology, because what these people want to achieve through socialism, they end up achieving the antithesis of that. I mean, look at Venezuela.
Yeah, well, the promise hasn't been recognized anywhere.
Never, in all of history.
Yeah, and it requires that people lose liberty,
right,
in exchange for hoped for utopia or better circumstances that have never been proven to work. And I think but it's attractive.
It is.
It's attractive to people because I think we all have a hunger to get something for nothing.
I mean, of course you do. It's your inclination, but the problem is there's an honor in hard work. There's an honor of being responsible for your own failures, yes, which hurts, and it's you would love to have the government come in and help you. I mean, just imagine if you started a business. Let's take my greatest mentor, Joel. He runs a great Chick-fil-A. Let's say if for whatever reason he was to fail at Chick-fil-A, wouldn't he love to know that the government's, oh, you know what? Hey, so why do you not work out? Well, here, let me give you all this money and help you out.
We need failure.
Exactly, but failure makes you better.
Yeah, and freedom to succeed also comes with it the flip side.
Exactly.
Which is the freedom
and the
to fail.
only way to experience the exhilaration of success is if you also have the risk of experiencing the disparity of failure.
Yeah, but see, these are basic things. Just a few decades ago, you would have people in both parties agreeing with what we just said.
Yep.
And now it's completely separate.
A lot of people, and I'll tell you, I think it speaks to this principle that I really guide myself after. I would rather live under dangerous freedom than safe subjugation. And if I live under safe subjugation, I don't have the ability to risk failure because the government's come in and said, oh, you can't risk failing. And so that means I don't have the ability to succeed.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And so it's really a fundamental, and if we get back to the basics, then the country can reach greatness again. And I think that's part of what your move to do is get us all back to the basics.
It is.
So I wish we had a ton more time.
I wish we did, Tommy.
Because I think we could keep going. I've got a couple more pages of things to talk about. But this has been a lot of fun, and we will get your goal map. You said we could put the goal map. I mean, that should be inspiring to everybody. They'll see where your head and your vision was 4 or 5 years ago and what's come true since then. And we'll put links to your campaign and to the values and things that are helpful to you. So
all right.
Best of luck.
Mr. Newberry, thank you, sir. Thank you for being a guiding light to my life. Thanks.
Thank you.
Means a lot.
You're welcome.